Commander Zexhai stood before the massive display screen in the command center of his flagship. The Corvani dreadnought stretched 15 kilometers from bow to stern, its dark hull bristling with weapons that could crack planets. Around him, dozens of his officers worked at their stations preparing for what should be a routine first contact mission. The target species called themselves humans. They lived on a blue world in a system they named Sol, orbiting a yellow star that barely registered on galactic maps. Intelligence reports painted them as typical primitives. They had split the atom only decades ago. Their fastest ships crawled between their own planets using chemical rockets. They fought wars with crude projectile weapons and explosive devices. Zexhai had overseen 47 first contact operations during his long career. The pattern never changed. Show overwhelming force. Deliver the ultimatum. Accept surrender. Welcome another species into the Galactic Federation as productive members of civilized society. Most species needed only a demonstration of superior technology to understand their position. The wise ones submitted immediately and prospered under Federation guidance. The human homeworld grew larger on the screen as the fleet approached. 300 Corvani warships moved in perfect formation, their energy shields shimmering like soap bubbles around hulls that dwarfed human construction. Long-range scanners detected the primitive defense satellites orbiting Earth, fusion-powered weapons platforms that might have impressed their neighbors a century ago. Against Federation technology, they were barely worth noticing. Communications. Officer, open a channel to the human military command, Zexhai ordered. His voice carried the authority of someone who had never failed in his duties to the Federation. Around the bridge, his crew prepared for the standard procedure they had performed so many times before. The main screen flickered and displayed the bridge of what appeared to be the largest human warship in orbit. The vessel looked clumsy and primitive compared to Corvani engineering. Exposed metal plating, visible weld marks, and cramped corridors spoke of a species that built machines like they built their stone cities, functional, but lacking elegance. A human male appeared on screen. He wore a dark blue uniform with metal insignia that probably indicated rank. His face showed no fear, despite the massive fleet that had just appeared in his system. If anything, he looked annoyed at being interrupted. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the UES Defiance. Identify yourselves and state your business in Earth space." Zexhai felt a moment of surprise at the direct tone. Most species opened first contact with expressions of awe or terror when faced with Federation power. This human spoke as if he were addressing equals. The translator confirmed the words carried no honorifics or signs of submission. "I am Commander Zexhai of the Corvani Empire, speaking for the Galactic Federation. Your species has reached the minimum threshold for contact. You will surrender your military forces and submit to Federation authority. Your world will be evaluated for integration into galactic civilization. Compliance will ensure your survival and prosperity." Morrison's expression hardened. Behind him, other humans moved with practiced efficiency, their hands dancing over control panels. Red lights began flashing throughout their primitive bridge. Battle stations, Zexhai realized with growing bewilderment. "Unknown hostiles, you have 10 seconds to withdraw from Earth space, or we will consider this an act of war. We don't surrender. We don't negotiate with invaders. Choose wisely." The channel closed before Zexhai could respond. Around the Corvani bridge, officers exchanged glances of confusion. In 400 years of expansion, no species had ever refused the initial contact offer. The benefits of Federation membership were obvious. Technology sharing, trade opportunities, protection from hostile neighbors, access to medical advances that could extend lifespans. Only a primitive species would reject such advantages. "Sir, the human vessels are powering weapons," reported the tactical officer. "They're moving into attack formation." Zexhai studied the display with professional interest. 43 human ships arranged themselves in a defensive line between the Federation fleet and their homeworld. Their largest vessel massed perhaps 2% of his flagship. Their weapons were chemical explosives and primitive energy beams. Mathematical analysis suggested the entire human fleet could be destroyed by a single Corvani destroyer without significant risk. They must not understand the situation, HFY concluded. Prepare a demonstration. Target their largest vessel with minimum force. Disable their weapons and engines. Once they see the futility of resistance, they'll become reasonable. The order passed through the fleet communication network. A single Corvani light cruiser moved forward, its main batteries charging. The energy discharge would cripple the human ship without destroying it completely. A measured response that would save lives while proving the point. Brilliant blue energy lanced across space and struck the human flagship. The primitive shields collapsed instantly. Atmosphere vented from multiple hull breaches. The ship listed to one side as its engines sputtered and died. HFY waited for the surrender signal. Every species followed the same pattern. Faced with absolute proof of their inferiority, they would see reason and accept Federation terms. The demonstration never failed to end resistance before serious casualties occurred. Instead, the crippled, human vessel opened fire. Every weapon that still functioned discharged at once. Nuclear missiles streaked toward the Corvani fleet. Particle beams that could barely scratch Federation armor blazed defiance across the void. The human ship began, moving again, limping forward on damaged engines, closing the distance for a better shot. Impossible, breathed the tactical officer. Their ship is dying, why are they still fighting? Around the damaged flagship, other human vessels pressed their attack. They had seen their most powerful ship nearly destroyed by a casual demonstration of Federation superiority. The logical response would be immediate surrender. Instead, they accelerated toward the enemy fleet with weapons blazing. HFY watched in fascination as human tactics unfolded. They knew they couldn't win. Their technology was centuries behind. Their numbers were pathetic. Yet they fought with an intensity that suggested they expected victory against impossible odds. More concerning was their willingness to accept casualties. The lead human destroyer exploded under concentrated fire from 3 Corvani vessels. Instead of deterring the others, its destruction seemed to enrage them. The remaining human ships pressed closer, launching everything they had in suicidal attack runs. "Sir, should we destroy them?" asked his weapons officer. HFY hesitated. The standard protocol called for minimum necessary force. These humans clearly didn't understand their situation. Perhaps a stronger demonstration would bring them to their senses. But something about their behavior troubled him. In 47 previous contacts, no species had continued fighting after losing 30% of their forces. The humans had already lost half their fleet and showed no signs of surrender. Continue minimum force engagement. Disable their vessels, but preserve the crews. I want to study these humans more carefully before proceeding. The battle continued for 3 more hours. One by one, human ships were disabled or destroyed. Not a single vessel retreated. Not one captain requested terms. They fought until their weapons stopped working, then tried to ram Corvani ships with their dying hulks. When silence finally fell over the battlefield, HFY stared at the wreckage floating in Earth orbit. 43 human ships reduced to scrap metal and bodies. 0 surrenders. 0 requests for mercy. 0 signs that they understood they had been beaten. On the planet below, energy readings indicated massive military mobilization. Instead of preparing surrender terms, the humans were readying every weapon they possessed for continued resistance. For the first time in his long career, Commander HFY faced a species that apparently didn't know when they were supposed to quit. Dr. Veltar entered the holding facility deep within the Corvani research vessel. 3 weeks had passed since the battle over Earth, and the war showed no signs of ending. Every day brought reports of human resistance that defied explanation. Ship crews fighting until their vessels broke apart around them. Ground forces that refused evacuation orders and died at their posts. Civilians who attacked Corvani soldiers with farming tools and kitchen knives. The 2 human prisoners sat in their containment cells, still wearing the torn remains of their military uniforms. Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez had taken shrapnel in her left arm during the evacuation of Europa Station. Sergeant Ben Clark bore burn marks across his face from an exploding console. Both should have been grateful to be alive. Both should have been ready to cooperate with their captors. Neither had spoken a word in 3 weeks. Dr. Veltar activated his recording device and approached the first cell. Rodriguez sat on the metal bench, her injured arm held against her chest. Her eyes tracked his movement but showed no emotion, no fear, no anger, no hope, just cold calculation, as if she were studying him the same way he studied her. Lieutenant Rodriguez, I am Dr. Veltar of the Corvani Science Division. I want to help you understand your situation. Your fleet is destroyed. Your colonies are under occupation. Your homeworld faces invasion. Cooperation with Federation forces will ensure better treatment for you and your people. Rodriguez said nothing. She continued staring at him with those strange human eyes. Every other species Veltar had studied showed clear emotional responses to interrogation. Fear made subjects more willing to talk. Anger could be channeled into useful information. Hope could be manipulated to gain cooperation. The human showed none of these responses. She sat perfectly still, breathing steadily, watching him with the patience of a predator, waiting for the right moment to strike. Veltar moved to the second cell. Sergeant Clark lay on his back, hands behind his head, staring at the ceiling. The burns on his face had healed poorly without proper medical attention. Federation medics could repair the damage easily, but Clark had refused all treatment. Sergeant, Clark, your companion is injured. Federation medical technology can heal her completely. All we require is information about human military capabilities, troop numbers, weapon specifications, defensive positions, simple data that will help us minimize casualties on both sides. Clark turned his head slightly to look at the Corvani scientist. For a moment, Veltar thought he saw something flicker in the human's expression. Then Clark smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. Go to hell, Clark said quietly, then returned his attention to the ceiling. Veltar made notes on his portable computer. The human response pattern remained consistent. No cooperation, no fear, no apparent concern for personal welfare or survival. In 40 years of xenopsychology research, he had never encountered a species that maintained such resistance under captivity. Dr. Nixom joined him in the corridor outside the cells. She carried a data pad filled with analysis reports from their ongoing study of human prisoners. 12 subjects captured from various battles, all showing the same behavioral abnormalities. Any progress? She asked, though her expression suggested she already knew the answer. None. They maintain resistance despite optimal pressure conditions. Neural scans show elevated stress hormones but no breakdown in cognitive function. Pain threshold tests indicate they can endure significant discomfort without losing focus. Most concerning, isolation protocols have no effect on their psychological state. Nixon pulled up her latest findings on the data pad. I've been analyzing their communication patterns. During battle recordings, human soldiers use specific phrases that seem to strengthen their resolve. They say things like, "Remember the fallen," and "For Earth, and never surrender." These aren't just words. They appear to trigger measurable changes in brain chemistry. Veltar considered this information. Every species had rallying cries and motivational phrases. But typically these were overcome by survival instincts when the situation became hopeless. Biological imperative should override cultural conditioning when death was certain. Have you identified the source of their collective programming? He asked. That's the problem. There is no programming, no central control mechanism, no chemical or technological influence on their behavior. They appear to be acting entirely through individual choice. This troubled Veltar deeply. Choice was a luxury of safe circumstances. When faced with extinction, every known species fell back on hardwired survival responses. Self-preservation overrode everything else. It was the fundamental law of evolution across the galaxy. They returned to the observation room overlooking the holding cells. Rodriguez had moved to the small window in her cell and was studying the corridor outside. She had been doing this for hours each day, mapping the facility layout from her limited view. Clark was exercising, doing push-ups, despite his injuries. Both maintained physical conditioning as if they expected to fight again. Computer, display tactical analysis of human resistance patterns. Veltar ordered. The holographic display showed a galaxy-wide map with red indicators marking human activity. Each symbol represented confirmed resistance operations against Federation forces. The pattern should have been decreasing as human military assets were destroyed. Instead, the red markers were multiplying. Explain the data discrepancy, Nixon requested. The computer's synthetic voice provided analysis. Human military casualties exceed 60% across all theaters. Remaining forces demonstrate increased activity rather than decreased capability. Resistance operations show improved coordination and effectiveness despite reduced numbers. Veltar studied the tactical reports in detail. On Mars, General Pete Hawkins had split his remaining forces into small units that conducted guerrilla operations from underground tunnels. His troops were outnumbered 12-1, yet Corvani casualties continued mounting daily. Supply convoys required massive escorts. Occupation forces couldn't secure territory permanently. Similar patterns emerged across human space. Civilians joined military operations without formal training. Industrial facilities were sabotaged by their own workers. Transportation networks were disrupted by coordinated attacks that required precise timing and communication. "This is impossible," Veltar muttered. "No species maintains organized resistance after losing primary military assets. They should be focused on survival and negotiation." Nixon pulled up biological analysis data. "I think I understand the problem. Look at these stress response readings from our prisoners." The medical scanner data showed human hormone levels during various stress tests. Instead of the expected pattern of increasing cortisol and decreasing performance, humans showed elevated adrenaline and improved reaction times. Their bodies were designed to function better under extreme pressure. Their fight-or-flight response is broken, Nixon explained. Every other species shows measurable decline in cognitive function when stress levels exceed survival thresholds. Humans show the opposite pattern. High stress improves their focus and decision-making capability. Veltar realized the implications. They're not fighting despite being afraid. They're fighting because being afraid makes them more effective. The observation was confirmed by additional data from battle recordings. Human soldiers performed impossible feats when their situation became hopeless. They operated damaged equipment beyond its design limits. They improvised weapons from debris. They executed complex tactical maneuvers while suffering casualties that should have destroyed unit cohesion. A soft chime indicated incoming communication from the fleet commander. Commander Zexai appeared on the communication screen, his expression grim. "Doctor, I need your analysis of human psychology. Our forces have encountered resistance at the Luna mining facility. The installation has been cut off for 2 weeks with no supplies or reinforcements. Intelligence estimates suggested the defenders would surrender within days. Instead, they launched an attack against our supply depot this morning." Veltar felt a chill of understanding. "Commander, how many humans are defending the facility?" "Approximately 300 personnel, mining engineers and security guards mostly. They're facing a full regiment of our best troops. Sir, I recommend extreme caution. Based on our research, humans don't follow standard behavioral patterns under pressure. They become more dangerous when their situation becomes hopeless." Zexai's image flickered with interference from the ongoing battle. "Explain that statement, Doctor." "Humans appear to lack the biological safety mechanisms that prevent other species from fighting to extinction. They can choose to continue combat regardless of odds or casualties. They don't know when they're supposed to quit." The communication ended abruptly as weapons fire erupted in the background. Veltar and Nixon exchanged worried glances. They were studying a species that violated fundamental principles of evolutionary biology. Rodriguez tapped on her cell window, drawing their attention. When Veltar looked toward her, she pressed her hand against the transparent barrier and mouthed, "A single word, soon." Admiral Lisa Carter stood in the command center of Phoenix Base, watching the tactical display with grim satisfaction. 6 months into the war, Earth's orbital defense station looked like it had been through hell. Hull patches covered blast damage from 3 separate Corvani attacks. Emergency lighting cast strange shadows across walls where the main power grid had failed. Half the crew worked in damaged sections with portable air supplies. But Phoenix Base was still operational, still fighting. still coordinating the defense of human space against impossible odds. The latest casualty reports scrolled across her secondary screen. 42% of Earth's military forces were dead or missing. The Mars colonies had fallen under occupation. Europa Station was a radioactive ruin. By every measure used by military strategists across the galaxy, humanity should have surrendered weeks ago. Instead, resistance was growing stronger. Carter pulled up the communication from General Pete Hawkins on Mars. The message had been transmitted through a network of hidden relay stations, bounced off asteroids and debris fields to avoid Corvani detection systems. The general's face showed the strain of months fighting in underground tunnels, but his voice carried the same determination that had kept human forces fighting since the first day. Lisa, we've completed the sabotage operation at Olympus Mining Complex. Corvani supply lines through this sector are cut for at least 2 weeks. My people are moving to secondary positions before they can organize a counterattack. Current strength is down to 400 effectives, but morale remains high. We're not going anywhere. Carter smiled despite the desperate situation. Pete Hawkins commanded what remained of the Mars Defense Force from a network of natural caves and abandoned mining tunnels. His original force of 5,000 had been reduced to a few hundred survivors, yet they continued operations that tied down an entire Corvani regiment. The pattern was repeating across human space. Small units that refused to acknowledge they were beaten. Civilian populations that supported resistance operations despite brutal retaliation. Individual soldiers who fought until their weapons stopped working, then improvised new ways to hurt the enemy. Communications. Get me, Captain. Roy Newman, Carter ordered. The main screen flickered and displayed the bridge of the UES Retribution. Newman's flagship looked even worse than Phoenix Base. Burn marks scarred every surface. Exposed wiring ran along the walls where proper repairs were impossible. The crew moved through their duties with the casual efficiency of people who had been living on borrowed time for months. Admiral, good to see you're still breathing, Newman said with a tired grin. What's the situation? Roy, intelligence reports say your ship was destroyed last week. Again. Care to explain how you're talking to me? Newman laughed, a sound with no humor in it. Corvani intelligence isn't very good at counting human ships, apparently. We've been declared dead 4 times now. Keeps them from looking too hard for us between battles. The Retribution represented everything that confused the Corvani about human military doctrine. The ship should have been scrapped months ago. Its armor was held together with welded plates salvaged from destroyed vessels. Its weapons were a mixture of human technology and captured alien equipment that shouldn't have been compatible. The crew included survivors from 6 different ships that had been destroyed in previous battles. By every reasonable standard, the Retribution was not a functional warship. Yet it continued appearing at critical battles, hitting Corvani forces when they least expected it, then disappearing into the debris fields that littered human space. What's your current status? Carter asked. We're operating at about 30% efficiency. Main engines are running on backup power. Port weapons array is completely offline. We're down to 200 crew members from the original 800. But we've got something special planned for the convoy that's heading toward Jupiter Station. Carter reviewed the tactical data. A major Corvani supply convoy was moving through the outer system, carrying reinforcements and equipment. For the ongoing siege operations, intelligence suggested the convoy was too heavily defended for any remaining human forces to threaten. Newman's plan was typically insane. He intended to use the Retribution's damaged condition as camouflage, drifting among the wreckage of previous battles until the convoy passed close enough for a surprise attack. The plan had almost no chance of success, and would certainly result in the destruction of his ship. Roy, you know this is suicide, Carter said quietly. Admiral, we've been dead since the first day of this war. We're just too stubborn to lie down. Newman's expression grew serious. Besides, those supplies are heading for the forces besieging Luna Base. Kate Sullivan and her people have been cut off for 4 months. If we can delay those reinforcements, maybe they can hold out a little longer. Carter had been following the siege of Luna Base with growing amazement. The mining facility had been written off as lost when Corvani forces surrounded it. 300 civilian miners and a handful of security guards trapped with no hope of relief. Every military manual said they should have surrendered immediately. Instead, Major Kate Sullivan had turned the mining complex into a fortress. Her improvised army used mining equipment as weapons and excavation tunnels as defensive positions. They launched raids against superior forces using tactics that violated every principle of military science. The latest intelligence report from Luna Base was typical of human operations throughout the war. Sullivan's forces had attacked a Corvani supply depot despite being outnumbered 15-1. They had destroyed enough equipment to delay the siege for another week, then retreated through maintenance tunnels that shouldn't have been large enough for human passage. Casualties among the defenders were approaching 60%. Supplies were exhausted. Medical facilities were overwhelmed. By every rational calculation, resistance should have collapsed weeks ago. Instead, morale reports indicated that Sullivan's people were more determined than ever. They had stopped thinking about survival and started thinking about how much damage they could cause before they died. "Admiral, we have incoming priority transmission from Luna Base," reported the communications officer. Sullivan's face appeared on the auxiliary screen. The major looked like she hadn't slept in days. Her uniform was torn and stained with grease from improvised mechanical work. Behind her, the mining facility's control room showed signs of jury-rigged repairs and makeshift equipment. "Admiral Carter, we've identified a vulnerability in Corvani siege tactics. They're rotating their perimeter forces every 6 hours to prevent fatigue. During the rotation, there's a 12-minute window where the northern approach is minimally defended. If Captain Newman's attack on the supply convoy succeeds, we can exploit that window for a major operation." Carter felt a familiar mixture of pride and despair. Sullivan was planning another impossible attack despite her desperate situation. The woman had been cut off from command authority for months, yet continued making tactical decisions with the confidence of someone who expected to win. "Kate, what kind of operation are you planning?" Sullivan's smile was sharp as broken glass. "We're going to steal their communications array. My technical people think they can modify it to work with our equipment. If we can tap into their command network, we can coordinate resistance operations across the entire system." The plan was brilliant and completely insane. Sullivan wanted to launch an offensive assault against superior forces to capture alien technology that might not even be compatible with human systems. The operation would require her people to leave their defensive positions and attack an enemy stronghold with weapons built from mining equipment. It was exactly the kind of plan that had been confusing Corvani commanders for months. Humans kept attacking when they should have been defending. They took offensive action when their situation was hopeless. They risked everything to gain small advantages that might not even matter in the larger war. Carter looked around the damaged command center of Phoenix Base. Her people worked at stations held together with spare parts and determination. The tactical display showed human forces scattered across the system, badly outnumbered and outgunned, yet still fighting. Every species the Corvani had ever encountered followed predictable patterns when faced with superior force. They reached a breaking point where survival instinct overrode military discipline. They made rational decisions about when to surrender and when to seek terms. Humans had no breaking point. They just kept fighting until someone stopped them. "All units, this is Admiral Carter," she announced on the Fleet Communication Network. "Operation Endurance is approved. Captain Newman, you are cleared for convoy interdiction. Major Sullivan, coordinate your assault with Newman's attack. All other commanders, prepare for follow-up operations based on Sullivan's intelligence gathering." Carter ended the transmission and returned her attention to the tactical display. Red icons marked human resistance throughout the system. Each symbol represented people who had chosen to fight despite impossible odds. Civilians who had become soldiers, miners who had become commandos, ship crews who sailed into certain death because someone had to make the enemy pay for every inch of human space. The Corvani had expected to fight a military force. Instead, they were fighting an entire species that refused to quit. 1 year into the conflict, Commander HFY reviewed the casualty reports with growing concern. The Corvani Empire had lost more ships in the past 12 months than in the previous 50 years of expansion. Not to superior technology or tactical brilliance, but to an enemy that simply refused to accept defeat. The latest report came from Admiral Korthvan, commanding the siege of Luna Base. The mining facility should have fallen months ago. Instead, the human defenders continued launching impossible attacks with equipment that barely functioned. Yesterday's raid had destroyed another supply depot using explosives made from mining charges and stolen Corvani power cells. "Sir, we have a transmission from Dr. Veltar," announced the communications officer. The scientist's image appeared on the main screen. Behind him, the research vessel's medical bay showed signs of hasty expansion. Every bed was filled with Corvani, soldiers suffering from what the medical staff called combat fatigue, a condition that had been virtually unknown before the human war. "Commander, I have completed my analysis of human stress response systems. The results are disturbing." Zexhai gestured for the doctor to continue. 3 weeks ago, he had authorized the capture of additional human subjects from various battle sites. The research had been necessary to understand why standard psychological warfare techniques had no effect on human forces. Humans possess a biological adaptation that is unique among known species. When faced with extreme stress, their bodies produce natural stimulants that enhance physical performance and mental focus. Where other species reach biological limits that force surrender, humans enter what they call an adrenaline state. Veltar displayed brain scan data on his portable screen. The images showed human neural activity during simulated combat scenarios. Instead of the expected shutdown patterns that indicated psychological breaking points, human brains showed increased activity in areas associated with aggression and problem-solving. More concerning is their pain response mechanism. Humans can consciously override survival instincts through what they call willpower. They make decisions to continue fighting, even when their bodies are damaged beyond normal function. Zexhai studied the medical data with professional interest. During his military career, he had seen countless species reach their physical and mental limits. Every biological organism had built-in safety mechanisms that prevented self-destruction. Pain forced retreat. Exhaustion demanded rest. Fear triggered surrender responses. Humans appeared to override all of these natural limitations through conscious choice. "Doctor, how do they maintain unit cohesion after suffering severe casualties?" "Every model predicts military breakdown once losses exceed 20%. That's the most troubling aspect of their psychology. Human military units actually increase their effectiveness as casualties mount. Survivors become more aggressive and take greater risks. They use the deaths of their companions as motivation rather than discouragement." This violated everything Zexhai understood about military science. Armies were supposed to weaken as they lost personnel and equipment. Morale should decline when victory became impossible. Rational commanders should seek terms when their forces faced annihilation. Human forces followed none of these patterns. They fought harder when they were losing. They took offensive action when they should have been defending. They launched attacks when they were outnumbered 10-1. Captain Roy Newman's ship exemplified the problem. The UES Retribution had been reported destroyed 6 times by different Corvani commanders. Each time, the vessel reappeared at crucial battles with jury-rigged repairs and impossible modifications. Newman's crew had grown more effective despite losing 60% of their original personnel. The latest encounter had been particularly frustrating. Newman had used his ship's damaged appearance to drift among the wreckage of a previous battle, waiting for a Corvani supply convoy to pass within range. The attack had succeeded despite overwhelming odds, destroying enough supplies to delay the Luna Base siege by 2 weeks. "Sir, incoming priority message from Major Sullivan at Luna Base," reported the tactical officer. Zexhai authorized the communication with reluctant curiosity. Sullivan had become something of a legend among Corvani forces. The human mining engineer had transformed a civilian facility into a military stronghold, using equipment that shouldn't have been capable of combat operations. Sullivan's face appeared on screen. She looked exhausted but determined. Behind her, the mining facility's control room showed extensive modification. Human technical personnel had somehow integrated captured Corvani equipment with their primitive computers. "Commander Zexhai, I'm Major Kate Sullivan, commanding Luna Base Defense Forces. I'm calling to discuss terms." For a moment, Zexhai felt relief. Finally, a human commander was ready to be reasonable. The siege had lasted 4 months. Sullivan's forces were down to fewer than 100 effective personnel. Their supplies were exhausted. Their equipment was failing. Major Sullivan, I'm prepared to discuss your surrender. Federation terms are generous for species that cooperate. Sullivan's expression hardened. I'm not calling to surrender. I'm calling to offer you terms for withdrawal from this system. The audacity of the statement left HFY speechless. Sullivan commanded fewer than 100 humans armed with improvised weapons. She faced a full regiment of Corvani troops, supported by orbital bombardment platforms. Her position was hopeless by any rational analysis. Major, perhaps you don't understand your situation. You are surrounded, outnumbered, and cut off from all support. Continued resistance will only result in unnecessary casualties. Commander, perhaps you don't understand our situation. We've been studying your tactical patterns for 4 months. We know your rotation schedules, your supply routes, and your communication protocols. We've identified 17 critical vulnerabilities in your siege operations. Sullivan gestured to someone off-screen. A technical officer handed her a datapad containing what appeared to be detailed intelligence reports. Your forces require supply runs every 72 hours to maintain siege effectiveness. Your commanders rotate every 6 hours to prevent fatigue. Your orbital platforms have blind spots in their sensor coverage that we've been mapping since day 1. HFY realized with growing alarm that Sullivan was describing classified operational details that should have been impossible for the defenders to obtain. Luna Base had been cut off from all external communication. How were they gathering intelligence on Corvani operations? We've also been modifying captured equipment to work with our systems. Yesterday's raid wasn't just about destroying your supply depot. We were field testing new weapons based on your own technology. The transmission ended abruptly. HFY stared at the blank screen, trying to process what he had just heard. Sullivan wasn't just refusing to surrender. She was threatening to escalate the conflict using stolen Corvani technology. Tactical analysis of Luna Base operations, he ordered. The main display showed a timeline of human activities during the siege. Instead of the expected pattern of declining resistance, Sullivan's forces had become more effective over time. They had learned to use Corvani equipment. They had developed new tactics based on observed enemy behavior. They had turned their isolation into an advantage by forcing the besieging forces to reveal their operational patterns. Dr. Veltar's analysis suddenly made sense. Humans didn't just refuse to surrender when their situation became hopeless. They used desperate circumstances to become more dangerous. Sir, we're receiving similar reports from other theaters, reported the intelligence officer. Human forces throughout the system are demonstrating improved coordination and effectiveness despite reduced numbers. HFY reviewed the tactical summary with growing unease. General Hawkins on Mars had expanded his tunnel network to cover 3 major industrial complexes. Captain Newman had somehow acquired 2 additional ships to supplement his impossible fleet. Admiral Carter was coordinating resistance operations across multiple star systems despite the destruction of most human communication networks. Every human commander was supposed to be dead or captured by now. Instead, they were launching increasingly bold operations against superior forces. They were learning from their defeats and adapting their tactics. They were turning captured equipment into weapons and using enemy intelligence against its owners. Most disturbing was their complete indifference to casualties. Human forces accepted losses that would have broken any other species. They continued fighting when their survival was impossible. They made sacrifices that served no rational military purpose except to make the enemy pay for every victory. Communications, get me Admiral Korthvan at Luna Base, HFY ordered. The fleet commander appeared on screen, his expression grim. Behind him, the bridge of his flagship showed signs of battle damage. Even the siege forces were taking casualties. From Sullivan's impossible raids. Admiral, what is your assessment of the Luna Base situation? Sir, the humans are using the mining facility as a base for operations throughout this sector. They've somehow established communication with other resistance groups. Their technical people have reverse-engineered our equipment and are building hybrid weapons. Continued siege operations are costing us more resources than the facility. 18 months after first contact, Commander HFY stood in the neutral meeting chamber aboard the diplomatic vessel Harmony. The ship belonged to the Madari Republic, a species known for their skill in resolving conflicts between other civilizations. They had volunteered to host peace talks between the Federation and humanity after watching the war spread beyond human space. Across the polished metal table sat Admiral Lisa Carter, flanked by Colonels Dan Murphy and Sue Patterson. Carter looked older than her files indicated, her face marked by the strain of coordinating an impossible defense. Murphy's left arm had been replaced with a mechanical prosthetic after the Mars campaign. Patterson bore scars across her neck from a ship explosion during the defense of Titan Station. All three humans carried visible wounds from 18 months of warfare, yet none showed any sign of defeat or submission. They sat with the calm confidence of people who believed they were negotiating from a position of strength. HFY found their attitude baffling. Human space was in ruins. Their population had been reduced by 40%. Their military forces existed only as scattered resistance groups hiding in asteroid fields and abandoned mining facilities. By every objective measure, humanity faced extinction within months. Admiral Carter, thank you for agreeing to this meeting, HFY began carefully. The Federation hopes we can find a peaceful resolution to this conflict. Carter's expression remained neutral. Commander, we appreciate the Madari Republic's offer to mediate, but let me be clear about our position. We're not here to discuss surrender terms. We're here to discuss your withdrawal from human space. The statement would have been laughable if delivered by any other species. Carter commanded perhaps 10,000 effective personnel scattered across dozens of hiding places. HFY controlled 300,000 troops supported by the most advanced military technology in the galaxy. Admiral, I don't think you understand the military situation. Your forces are decimated. Your colonies are occupied. Your homeworld faces invasion. Continued resistance serves no purpose except to increase casualties. Colonel Murphy leaned forward, slightly. His mechanical arm whirred softly as he placed his hands on the table. Commander, I don't think you understand human military doctrine. We don't fight because we expect to win. We fight because we refuse to lose what matters to us. HFY had read Murphy's service record with professional interest. The human had lost his arm during the evacuation of New Denver Colony. Instead of seeking medical retirement, he had returned to combat duty with his prosthetic limb. His unit had been responsible for some of the most successful raids against Federation supply lines. Colonel, your people have suffered tremendous losses. Surely you want to prevent further bloodshed. Federation membership offers significant benefits: technology sharing, medical advances, protection from hostile neighbors. Protection from who? Patterson asked quietly. Before you arrived, we didn't have any hostile neighbors. Our biggest conflicts were trade disputes and territorial boundaries. You created the threat you're offering to protect us from. Patterson commanded what remained of the Luna-based defenders after Major Sullivan's death 3 months earlier. The mining facility had finally fallen, but only after a siege that cost the Federation more resources than capturing a dozen normal worlds. Sullivan had died in the final assault, detonating the facility's main reactor to deny it to enemy forces. Her sacrifice had become a rallying cry across human resistance networks. Instead of breaking human morale, Sullivan's death had inspired new levels of determination among scattered survivors. The Federation seeks to bring peace and prosperity to all species, HFY explained. Resistance to galactic civilization serves no constructive purpose. Your people could benefit greatly from integration into our economic and technological systems. Carter pulled out a small data pad and activated a holographic display. The image showed casualty statistics from the past 18 months. Federation losses were highlighted in red, human losses in blue. Commander, let's discuss the actual military situation. You've lost 47 major warships, including 3 dreadnoughts. Your ground forces have suffered casualties exceeding 20% in every occupied territory. Your supply lines require constant protection against human raiders. Your siege operations consume more resources than the territories are worth. The statistics were accurate, though HFY was surprised. Carter had access to detailed Federation casualty reports. Human intelligence gathering had improved dramatically throughout the war despite their lack of formal spy networks. Meanwhile, human resistance operations have expanded to 15 star systems. Our forces may be scattered, but they're operating with increasing effectiveness. We've learned to use your own technology against you. We've adapted to your tactical patterns. Every month we become more dangerous, not less. Zexhai realized Carter was stating facts rather than making threats. Human forces had indeed become more effective as the war progressed. They had reverse-engineered Federation equipment, developed new tactics based on enemy weaknesses, and somehow maintained coordination, despite the loss of centralized command. Admiral, your analysis overlooks the fundamental imbalance. Federation forces outnumber remaining human military personnel by 30 to 1. Your scattered units cannot maintain effective resistance indefinitely. You're right, Carter agreed. We can't maintain resistance indefinitely, but we don't need to. We just need to make this war cost more than you're willing to pay. Murphy activated his own data display, showing Federation resource allocation over the past year. Your empire spans thousands of worlds. This conflict is consuming military assets you need for other operations. How long before your neighbors start questioning Federation strength? How long before other species decide they don't want to join your galactic civilization? The question struck at Zexhai's deepest concerns. Reports from other sectors indicated growing unrest among recently conquered species. The prolonged human war was encouraging resistance movements that had been dormant for decades. Several Federation allies were questioning the cost of continued expansion. Furthermore, Patterson added, every day this war continues, we learn more about your technology and tactics. Eventually, some of our people will escape human space and share that knowledge with other species. Do you really want to teach the galaxy how to fight the Federation? Zexhai felt a chill of understanding. The humans weren't just fighting for their own survival. They were gathering intelligence that could threaten the entire Federation if it spread to other species. Their resistance was becoming a university for anti-Federation warfare. What exactly are you proposing? He asked carefully. Carter leaned back in her chair. Her expression relaxed for the first time since the meeting began. Complete withdrawal of Federation forces from human space. Recognition of humanity as an independent civilization with full territorial sovereignty. Establishment of formal diplomatic relations between our governments. The terms were impossible. No species had ever forced the Federation to withdraw from conquered territory. Accepting human demands would encourage resistance movements throughout the galaxy. Other species would question Federation authority. And if we refuse these terms? Then, we continue fighting, Carter said simply. We retreat to the asteroid belts and build our strength. We establish hidden bases in systems you consider worthless. We study your technology and develop countermeasures. We make this war so expensive that you eventually decide human space isn't worth the cost. Murphy's mechanical fingers drummed against the table. Commander, you've been fighting us for 18 months. In that time, how many Federation planets have applied for membership? How many species have requested protection from their neighbors? How many allies have offered additional military support? Zexhai realized the human strategy with growing alarm. They weren't trying to defeat the Federation militarily. They were trying to make Federation expansion politically impossible by demonstrating that conquest carried unacceptable costs. You're using your own destruction as a weapon against us, he said quietly. We're using our refusal to be destroyed as a weapon against you, Carter corrected. Every species you've conquered accepted defeat when their situation became hopeless. We don't have that biological programming. We can choose to keep fighting regardless of casualties or odds. Patterson leaned forward. Commander, we've studied your expansion history. Every successful conquest followed the same pattern. Show overwhelming force, accept surrender, integrate the conquered species. Your entire military doctrine assumes enemies will eventually become reasonable and submit. Humans don't become reasonable when we're losing, Murphy added. We become vindictive. We start thinking about how much damage we can cause before you finally stop us. That's not a mindset your empire is equipped to handle. Zexhai looked at the three humans across the table. They had lost their homes, their families, their civilization. They faced an enemy with vastly superior technology and numbers. Yet they negotiated with the calm confidence of certain victory. For the first time in Federation history, a conquered species was offering terms to their conquerors. They were demanding recognition as equals rather than begging for mercy as subjects. "We'll need to consult with Federation leadership," HFY said finally. "Carter,